Y Media Group, the fastest growing media group in North America.
Hello and welcome to Y Media Newsroom. I'm Ramona Singh, and it's great to be here with you today. We have a lot to talk about when it comes to the conflict we saw escalate between the United States and Iran. Well, there's news coming out of the region as it looks like things have calmed a little bit. We have the latest development on the Prime Minister's trip from NATO, as well as to Saudi Arabia, and much more when it comes to business news. Now, what we've seen is that after 2 days of intense US and Iranian military strikes, the Middle East has entered an uneasy calm as we've seen this escalation with 90 strikes from the United States and then Iran attacking the GCC countries. Well, it looks like Qatar is now leading the renewed diplomatic efforts between the two nations for the 60 days that were set aside after the MOU was signed on June 17th to essentially talk about what this peace deal would look like now. Since Qatar has now renewed diplomatic efforts between the two countries to prevent any further escalations. And guess what? They are in the range of the attacks that would hit them in the GCC countries. So you have now Washington that's saying that there's technical negotiations that are taking place with Tehran and they'll continue while there are still military forces on both sides that remain at high alert in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, that is also another issue where the Strait of Hormuz remains what would be under a maximum security alert and what would be an ongoing concern about the global energy supplies. We didn't see that much of a uptick in terms of the gas prices here in Canada, but it's still staying relatively high. And now this is a fighting that has temporarily subsided after what we saw with massive escalations in the last 2 days, with President Trump announcing at the NATO summit that the ceasefire is over, essentially. And so now we're seeing that there's calmer waters. Now, Qatar is the mediator right now, as well as Pakistan, but right now Qatar has brought both sides back to the table. And now the IAEA is monitoring Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant after the reported attacks by the U.S. Military. Now, Iran also has warned that Israel sent a clear warning to Israel that it will not be spared if Iranian infrastructure is attacked. And this is a time where we're also seeing that the UK maritime trade operations are keeping the Strait of Hormuz at a threat level that is very high, which will prevent vessels going into the area, which will also create insurance for those vessels to be at a premium rate. So now the International Energy Agency's warned renewed fighting threatens global oil market recovery, as we're seeing that oil demands have been expected to decline in 2026 before recovering in 2027. That is what was estimated. Now, as soon as the escalations did take off about 2 days ago, the markets did react and crude oil went up to $80 per barrel. It went down to $76 per barrel in the last couple of days. But this is the time where we're also watching what's taking place with Israel and southern Lebanon. Israel still continues to do its military operations in Gaza, Lebanon, and the West Bank. Lebanon and Israel continue to implement what would be a U.S. brokered framework, despite this ongoing cross-border attacks, with Hezbollah saying that they don't accept this new agreement. Now, this latest fighting follows a collapse of what we saw fragile ceasefire between the United States and Iran. And, the news reports of hearing about US first hearing Iran strike three vessels that were passing through the Strait of Hormuz without giving a notification to Iran that they were going to do so. And then there was the US targets on 90 locations across Iran. At the same time, you have the procession, the funeral procession of the late Ayatollah Ali Khamenei taking place in Iran, where you have millions of people on the streets. And this diplomacy is now back on. This is a developing story, so we're gonna give you the latest. And things seem to escalate usually on weekends, it appears. And so we're gonna watch closely this weekend and let you know if anything does escalate. But hopefully for now, it appears that they're back on technical talks between the two countries. And this is also at a time where you saw this pause in fighting It should not be mistaken for a lasting ceasefire because we've seen this take place time and time again in the last 4 months and also in the last year and a half since the 12-day war in Iran with the United States, Israel, and Iran in 2025. Now, the Strait of Hormuz does continue to face elevated security risks, and both Washington and Tehran are saying that they're going to go back to the table to be able to deal with this trust deficit that remains between the two countries. And for those reasons, the mediators are very critical during these tough talks. Now, good news on the Canadian front. Canada adds 18,000 jobs as unemployment falls to 6.5%. So the Canadian labor market is continuing its recovery in the month of June. Essentially, those numbers are a big welcome, as the first initial estimate by economists was there were going to be only 10,000 jobs in the month of June. But now Stats Canada has revealed that 18,200 jobs have been posted for the month of June. And that's also great because unemployment rate has edged down to the 6.5%, beating what would be the economists' expectations. Now, hiring has been driven primarily by part-time employment in hospitality and retail, while manufacturing and construction continue to struggle. The stronger than expected report reinforces expectations that the Bank of Canada will leave interest rates unchanged later this month. So these are significant numbers, as the economists did expect that 10,000 new jobs and 6.6% unemployment. So this was a surprise because there were more jobs that were created and unemployment came down even lower than the amount. Now, part-time employment has increased to 17,500 jobs. And when it comes to accommodation and food services, it added 14,700 jobs. Wholesale and retail trade gained 16,400 jobs, as well as manufacturing and construction lost nearly 30,000 jobs combined. Youth unemployment fell from 13.4% to 12.7%. Now, when it comes to the average hourly wage growth, accelerate to 3.7%, up from 3.2% in May. Now, the financial markets are largely expecting that Bank of Canada will hold what would be the sixth consecutive meeting that will take place later this month, essentially not signaling that there's recovery. We are in a technical recession after Q4 of 2025 and Q1 of 2026. It appears that in Q2 of 2026, things look a lot better with the economy. And Canada's labor market has struggled. We know that to be the case in those previous quarters, but now we're seeing that change. And this is after the surprise gain of, if you recall, 88,000 jobs back in May. And now the June marks as the second consecutive month of positive employment growth, suggesting the economy may be stabilizing despite this ongoing trade uncertainty. Part of the reason it could be based on hospitality is jobs and retail that have increased, could be because the FIFA World Cup was being hosted here in Canada during that time frame. So that'll be very interesting to take a look in terms of what it means. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.